What if the very first step in practicing trust, what if to build trust, you must extend trust?
Welcome to Season 3 of Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations, with your host, Executive Leadership Coach and CEO of the Granger Network, Kari Granger, and me, Paul Adams, CEO of Sound Financial Group. This season focuses on trust. This is episode 37, How to Practice Trust.
Welcome back to Leadership Impact, How to Practice Trust. So this season, we've looked so far at why to trust. Like, why even trust? What's the business case for trust? And what a culture of trust or distrust looks like. And we've debunked the myth of unconditional trust being the only kind of trust. So, Paul, today I want to get into how we start to practice trust.
You know what I think? This is probably things like trust falls. And we should spend the rest of the podcast talking about how to push yourself toward terminal velocity as quickly as you can, headed to the floor, hoping that somebody you work with is competent to catch you.
And not only that, but we should do that in the woods.
Far away from society and medical attention.
And away from the office place, right? Because trust is something we do outside of office on like just one day.
And we'll do that away from the office, outside of our regular environment, so that we can't apply it to our regular environment every day.
Yeah. You know what the key in all that, though? You have to be stiff.
Yeah.
Like as stiff. As soon as you
as soon as you crumple up. I watched this whole series of fails just before our recording today, and it does seem to be a key component.
Yeah, though, I get while we make fun, and it was certainly part of my highlights of summer camp growing up, people still do this. And I think part of that is, what's this trust thing? It's so mysterious. It's like this thing we can't get our hands on, right? So we can talk about how it's not there. We can talk about how it is there, but we don't really know how to build it. So we come up with things like a trust fall. And really, if we think about, well, how does trust come about? And mostly when I ask that question to people, just how does trust happen? How do you trust people? How do you begin to trust people? And how do you create trust in your relationships? What do you think most people say?
I think most people would say it's either you have it or you don't. You know what trust is. Come on, and they would say, well, other people just earn it.
Yeah, that's like the biggest thing is like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to evaluate. Did you earn my trust? Do you deserve it? Am I going to get burned with you? So I'm going to wait until you prove to me that you're trustworthy. Then I shall extend my trust to you.
Like a scepter to a subject who has earned it. I can extend my scepter. But it is like that. And it's totally outside your control when you relate to it that way.
Right. Well, actually, you actually think it's in your control because you're limiting your trust, right? You're not like...
Yes, it feels in control,
doing something stupid.
But it's actually not in your control.
It's actually not in your control. It's completely, you're at the effect of the other person's actions.
Yes.
Right? But here's the crazy thing. If you watch me waiting for you to prove to me that you're trustworthy, what are the behaviors you're going to see from me? If you look at me, waiting for you.
Oh, then I'm going to feel like you're judging me, assessing me.
Yeah.
And I might have to be on my toes more. And I'm probably going to pick up, if I do something to break trust, I'm probably not going to get a straight communication about that. I'm going to be left picking up in your body language or the way you organize around me inside the company.
Yeah, totally. So do I feel very trusting or to you?
No, you don't feel trusting to me. And yet I'm going to have to perform that trust for you.
Yeah, so here we are, both watching each other, waiting for this trust to be proven.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, let's just consider a total alternative way. What if the very first step in practicing trust, what if to build trust, you must extend trust? Like just extend a little trust first. Because if you watch me, Paul, with one just small little extension, like I'm going to trust you. Of course, last episode, we talked about it being calculated. It doesn't have to be 100% or 0%, right? But what if I extend a little trust? What are you going to notice in my behavior, my actions, my body language, if I extend a little trust to you first?
I'm willing to bet your body language is going to show up more welcoming. The way you engage with me will be like you'll be thinking about what I'm thinking about rather than sitting back only judging my actions. And because you're extending trust to me, I bet you're willing to help me show up as trustworthy to you.
Yeah, it may not even be conscious, right? But if you're observing that with me, you're likely to act consistent with being trustworthy, right? So if I say, hey, I trust you, you're going to show up with those actions that are going to be more trustworthy actions. You're going to also be a little bit more vulnerable. You're going to be a little bit more connected. You're going to say, oh, okay, maybe I'll extend a little bit of trust. So then we start in this great cycle that increases and builds trust. So many places I see or have conversations with people that it's like, well, I don't trust them, or they haven't proven their trust to me, or they did this thing and therefore I'm closed off. So now how do you reverse that? Is you begin by extending what Julio Alala called a window of trust. Just a little window. You don't have to extend an entire warehouse door of trust, but you could crack that window open. So I remember I was coaching somebody who was in a college athletic department. And this was a college athletic coach. And he was having the hardest time with his athletic director. His athletic director would say things. He's like, he doesn't trust me, and he doesn't, he really doesn't care for us. And, he's not really, doing what's best for us coaches. And when he began to extend a window of trust, so what did that mean? That meant I'm going to extend a little opening, just enough. I'm going to trust you to have an authentic conversation about how I'm feeling. Okay, so I'm not like, I trust you completely, but the extension of a window is I'm going to extend enough trust to be a little bit more vulnerable and to share with you my experience working under your leadership. So he opened just a tiny little peephole. He didn't even say all of his feelings. He just said, here's the thing. When you made this decision, it left me with the idea that you didn't understand what I was dealing with. Okay, that's just a tiny little bit of trust. Now, the athletic director could stomp on that, close it right down, or he could respond with, oh, thank you for bringing that to me. Okay, and he did the latter. So then my client was able to extend a little more trust. So he's doing this in a calculated fashion, but trust building began with his extension of trust. And 6 months later, he ends up being one of the key people that this athletic director relies on to let him know what's actually happening.
Isn't that amazing that it literally all started not with sitting back, not saying, I need you to trust me. I need you to be more trustworthy, not a dictate, an extension.
Yeah, nothing that I need from you. I'm going to extend my trust.
And I always think about how am I going to be able to hold on to these things or help our audience hold on to things. And it's like, rather than expecting it, the trust, extend the trust.
I love that. Yeah, don't expect it, extend it.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Well, so we're actually going through something along these lines right now at Sound Financial Group. and we had a major vendor of ours that's got acquired or is going through the process of being acquired. And now we've kind of been used to our vendor. We know all of the players. We know every decision maker, et cetera. And now it's this new bigger vendor who has acquired them. And so we extended a little trust. Like, okay, we'll be patient. We won't immediately not be customers of yours. We'll wait. Because they said, can you give us a month? So great, we'll give you a month. Came close to the month time, and how this was going to affect us, we didn't yet have in writing, which is what our request was. Mm-hmm. So, okay, well, we don't have that. I said, well, we might be able to do these other things as a possibility, but can we have you on a phone call with the acquiring company? Because you're one of you guys, Sound Financial Group, is one of our biggest clients. It's okay. So we get on that call, very good conversation, little things, everybody showed up on time and all that. So the little extension of trust, they showed up the way they should. And then we told them what our concerns were. They said, great. And we'll have you a letter that says that by Monday. Mm. We didn't have it Monday. Mm. We didn't have it Tuesday. And we were in communication. Like we didn't get it Monday. We didn't get it Tuesday. We got it Wednesday, like after hours. And we had made some other commitments of things we needed to check out. But what we had done in extending that trust is we really needed all that information by Friday. Mm-hmm. Really need, but they committed to Monday. Mm-hmm. So we were okay.
You mean like you needed it you really had a 5-day window.
Yes.
But they didn't know
They didn't know that.
Okay. All they knew is they were going to get it to you by Monday.
Yes. So we were able to extend trust in a way that we could observe it without being massively negatively impacted by it. And here's what it opened up that was wonderful. Is rather than complaining about it, I had a little bit of a funny answer for them. That when they didn't get it and they sent an email with some excuses as to why, because people love to treat excuses plus no result same as giving you the result. So
go listen to season 2. Yeah, go ahead.
And so what I did is I said, I just wrote back, hey, I think that us doing this way would be a little bit like sending a haircut through the mail. We're probably both going to be dissatisfied and nobody's going to get their money's worth. I look forward to getting the letter. So I literally said something that was like, expressed a touch of dissatisfaction, but it was kind of funny. And then what we did is we had Corey call and work through the issues that we had. And then what he was able to say was, can we talk a little bit about how this was for us? And I want to share that with you. And shared it with him to say, it's very normal in business that you tell somebody you're going to have something Monday and then they get it later. And that's normal. For us, that's not how we work. And we will oftentimes take a commitment from someone like yourself and you're going to get it to us Monday. Then we promise somebody else will deliver with that on Tuesday. We need to make sure that we don't get left in the lurch this way and really like to have, it's fine. Tell us something's going to take a week or 2 weeks, but please don't tell us it's going to take 1 week when it's actually going to take 1 week and a day. And so now we're in this new step of a relationship with them, all because we just extended a little bit of trust through this. And we're still finding out how trustworthy it will all be and whether or not we remain a customer of theirs. Mm-hmm. But now we're going through the stages of just extending little pieces of trust and then we're getting a chance to communicate with them about the way that it worked out or not. But I do have to say, what I'm hoping for some input on is I feel like we're still a bit, I don't know the right way to put it, but like observatory, like we're giving them chances, but my own personal orientation, Kari, I feel like I'm sitting back watching what they're going to do next with my arms crossed mentally.
Yeah. So you're judging and assessing.
Yeah.
Which is okay. It's okay. It's the beginning of a relationship. You want to make sure from your business that you're not going to be putting yourselves at risk.
Oh my gosh. What? That is a big deal. Like the way I was listening earlier. So I extend the trust, but it is okay to be I don't mean a bad way, like judgmental, like not like somebody's hair, but to have judgment about whether or not they're trustworthy after I extend it. That's not, for lack of a better way of saying it, that's not allowed.
Well, you're making assessments. Mm-hmm. And if you remember now, not everybody knows what we're going to mean by this. And We'll look up what the episode is later to look at, but it is grounding your assessment. So you have an assessment, right?
Yes.
I can trust these people. I cannot trust these people.
Yes.
And later in the season, we should probably talk about the different dimensions that we can evaluate a person's trustworthiness, okay? Because as long as it's just this big thing, trust or not trust, we're not thinking about, well, is it their competence? Is there accountability? What is it that I can trust or not? But what you're doing right now is you are in the process of grounding your assessment. You're in the process of saying, I assess I can trust them. Now, what criteria ought I be looking at to determine whether or not I can trust them? And let me begin to see evidence for or against that criteria, right? So you're looking to ground an assessment of whether or not you can trust them. Now, you give them the best bet by continuously extending trust. Like you even extended trust to have a conversation. Corey, to have a conversation, you extended a little trust that they weren't going to just slam the door on you.
Yes. Well, and I know we don't want to go into it too deep in this episode, and we'll catch it, I think, in the next two. But to me, this idea of setting up the criteria and then assessing it against the criteria also stops me. My personal proclivity, probably many of our listeners, is like, okay, you broke that trust with me. We're done. I'm now got my rabbit ears up. I'm only looking for the negative things. Instead, I'm able to say, okay, so what is it we want to do? Okay, we're now, all that aside, however I felt during this first one, where they're a few days late, what's the new criteria? Okay, it's going to take them up to 2 weeks to get us that next letter because now he's properly assessing how busy his legal department is. Great. And then now the only criteria is, are they friendly? Do they treat us well? And 2 weeks from now, do we have that letter?
Yeah. And Paul, there's an accountability piece, right? That's where you're looking at. Yeah. Like, do they do what they said they would do? Or did they properly communicate ahead of time? That's one criteria for trustworthiness.
Yes.
The other piece I heard was just how they're responding to you bringing up breakdowns. Can I trust you to be able to receive my breakdowns and my challenges and my concerns, my complaints? Can I trust you to work through these things with me? So it's kind of another, you extended trust in that domain. And that's another criteria that you may be actively making an assessment around.
That's great.
So I want to circle us back to opening a window of trust as the first step in practicing trust, right? So even as we ground our assessments, the purpose of a well-grounded assessment is to take action. It's not to close down action. So as you're assessing, grounding your assessment in this situation to say, I can trust them in the way they respond, but I can't yet trust them in making their due dates. So now, what kind of window of trust can I extend to begin to build that trust back up? And one of the things you did, which was really great, is you had a conversation. You might come back and you might say, hey, you guys, I know that you just committed to giving us this document in 2 weeks. Maybe in a week, you might say, hey, I know you committed to this in a week. Are you guys still set up to do that? And you're extending the window, but maybe it's a little smaller, right? You want to support them. But the practice is always the question, what window of trust might I extend? And it might just be one conversation. It might just be one transaction. Now, I also don't want to leave people with the idea that you should always trust. So, Paul, you're going through these different cycles. You've extended trust. You've extended a window. You've given it an authentic try. You didn't just close it down after they messed up once. Yeah.
Yes.
If they keep messing up, it would not make good business sense to continue to transact with them.
Yes, I agree.
So yeah, it is an appropriate stance to take. If people continuously betray your trust over and over again, or they are not capable of what you're asking them to do, they don't have the competence or the skill set, then absolutely it's an appropriate stance to take is not to trust. But we want to first consider, did we do our work by first extending a window of trust? And when I choose not to trust, I also choose the consequences of not trusting.
You can choose not to trust, but you cannot opt out of the consequences of not trusting.
Yeah, I choose not to trust you, Paul, but there are consequences to that. We can't do business together.
Yes.
Our relationship has to be really limited to a certain domain. Yeah, so I can choose not to trust, but I also need to choose the consequences, just like I can choose to decline anything. And I also, when I choose to decline, I choose the consequences of that declination.
Kari, I think that's a great place where we can leave off on this episode and know that as we're talking about this, as you guys go into your week, that you can kind of see that if there are people in your organization that you've felt like perhaps you couldn't trust, that you can extend some trust, that you should set up the criteria of what it's going to be when they have done the things that would have them earn your trust. That way you don't have your rabbit ears and you're just looking for the problems in that relationship. That it's okay to not trust certain people and situations because you don't want to risk damage to relationships or to the business. And when it's all said and done, stay centered in the fact that you have control of the trust, that it's your opportunity to extend it. You can do it in these simple, small steps as you go through your week this week. Perhaps one of those steps of trust is you could send this episode to a few people within your organization saying, I'd love to get together, have a cup of coffee, and think about how we could implement this among our team in our business. And as always, we hope that this episode has been a contribution to your leadership impact. Thank you for tuning into Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. Subscribe now at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.